The CFO didn't even look at me when he said it, just tossed out a line over speakerphone like I was a printer they were canceling mid-lease. We've decided to streamline your tool access. Your contract remains intact, of course. Thanks for your flexibility. Then the call ended just like that. No heads up, no discussion. Just silence and the sudden inability to access the very dashboards I'd built from scratch over 4 fiscal years, 2 acquisitions, and 1 near-total infrastructure meltdown they still like to pretend never happened. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just stared at the gray login error blinking on my screen like a middle finger in Morse code and whispered, "You're going to regret that." Because here's the thing. I wasn't some outsourced tech temp juggling invoices and praying for contract renewals. I was the system. The dashboards, the compliance indicators, the executive-level KPI feeds, all built on Framework OS. A proprietary middleware suite I designed, debugged, and maintained under license from my own LLC. Every data stream they relied on, routed through nodes I encrypted, secured, and sandboxed myself. But that was always the pattern, wasn't it? Treat me like the IT janitor who knew where the broom closet was, while pretending the floors just magically stayed clean. I'd get tagged on Slack after hours with quick asks, and looped in on high-stakes updates like an afterthought. They'd fly out for executive offsites while I was double-checking data integrity and supply chain logs they couldn't spell. I wasn't invited to QBRs. Hell, I wasn't even on the org chart. Just a vendor whose emails got ignored until something broke. But I kept showing up. Because I don't build for applause. I build because order matters. And because, unlike them, I read everything. Including the master service agreement they barely skimmed before signing. The one with my clause 6.2b. In plain English, no fine print. Client's usage license remains valid only if continuous administrative access is maintained to consultant. That clause had sat there, quiet and inert, like a pressure trigger under floorboards no one thought to check. Until now. Before we go further, if you've been listening this long and haven't hit subscribe, now's the time. 97% of people hear these stories without subscribing, but if this kind of corporate sabotage and poetic justice hits home, a like and sub really fuels the team. Back to it. The new CFO's name was Lance, which already tells you half of what you need to know. He came from some fintech startup with a name like Glorb or Nutter, all buzzwords and layoffs and B-school lingo. Within 3 weeks of joining, he'd slashed budget lines, cut travel reimbursements, and proudly announced that vendor consolidation was the new cost efficiency strategy. Apparently, I was a line item to consolidate. He never asked what my framework did. Never inquired why I still had superadmin access to half the production pipeline. Didn't care that the nightly compliance audit script still sent reports through my node structure before uploading them to their SEC-facing database. All he saw was a monthly retainer, and a name he didn't recognize on the internal tooling access list. So he did what all underqualified executives do when they feel insecure. He tried to erase the parts he didn't understand. What he didn't know was this. I had warned the previous CFO to include a contract review every fiscal cycle. I had warned legal gently that my framework wasn't open source. I even offered to present a walkthrough of my licensing structure to the executive team. No one cared. No one listened. Until the blinking stopped. Until the dashboards went black. But we're not there yet. First, I had to watch them gloat. First, I had to let Lance feel like he'd pulled off the perfect budget cut. First, I had to let the silence hum just long enough for them to forget I'd ever existed. Then, and only then, would I show them what it means to build quietly. And dismantle even quieter. The morning it happened, I was halfway through debugging a malformed SKU import script when the screen froze. At first, I thought it was just another one of their infrastructure hiccups, load balancer timing out again or some forgotten cron job choking on legacy junk. But when I hit refresh, the login prompt came back. Then another. Then a red banner I hadn't seen before. Access revoked. Contact administrator. I didn't panic. I didn't even blink. I just leaned back in my chair, sipped my coffee, and let the silence confirm what I already suspected. They cut me off. Not a single heads up. No courtesy call. Not even the bare minimum fake apology email. Just an access wall dropped like I was a disgruntled temp who tried to download payroll data. Seconds later, the email arrived like clockwork. Subject line. Tooling update access optimization. Lance's name in the signature block. The kind of message written by someone who thought tone was the same thing as leadership. Clara, as part of our ongoing efforts to streamline operational tooling and reduce redundancy, we've sunset your internal environment access. Your contract remains active, of course, and we appreciate your continued support in this transition. Let us know if you need anything within scope. Translation: we want to keep using your work, but we don't want you watching us do it. I stared at that email for a full 60 seconds. My coffee went cold. I didn't feel angry. Felt steadied, like someone had finally tried to play chess with me after years of assuming I was the janitor sweeping up the pieces. I typed one word into my notepad. Noted. Then I closed the script I'd been working on, opened a clean terminal window, and logged into my own environment, the one they couldn't touch. FrameworkOS was still live, still routing their API calls, still pulling from the upstream warehouse and packaging it for delivery across all 8 of their departmental dashboards. Licensing beacon ping green. Audit trail clean. Domain license. Registered under Clara West Consulting, LLC. They hadn't shut anything down, just their illusion of control. What they didn't realize was that their dashboards weren't plug-and-play. They weren't some off-the-shelf Power BI package a summer intern could reconfigure. They were custom-stitched systems that interface with legacy data formats and vendor-specific pipelines, built during a merger no one even documented properly. Every drop-down, every metric, every color-coded box ran through logic trees I personally engineered and licensed. No admin key, no real-time metrics. No real-time metrics, no compliance. No compliance, no Q4 reporting. But sure, Lance. Streamline away. I checked their support queue for fun. My open tickets had been closed with a note. Vendor access sunset per CFO directive. Just like that. Months of backlog grooming, prioritization strategies, and cross-departmental syncs. Deleted with a checkbox. Even the team Slack kicked me out. One minute I was replying to a supply chain analyst's message. Next minute, you no longer have permission to access this workspace. Cute. I opened my contract folder and pulled up the MSA. Scrolled to clause 6.2b. Highlighted the language I'd written myself. Smiled. Then I opened a blank incident log and started documenting every access revocation, every failed API ping, every license violation timestamp. Because what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that removing my access wasn't a slap on the wrist. It was a contractual tripwire. And I had just stepped back calmly to let gravity take its course. 3 years ago, I sat across from a guy named Marty in a too-warm conference room with a rattling ceiling vent and a coffee pot that hadn't been cleaned since the Obama administration. Marty was the CFO before Lance. A harmless, balding yes-man with a golf addiction and a habit of forwarding emails with no subject lines. He thought of contracts like he thought of firewalls, necessary annoyances for people who didn't know how to just get things done. That day, we were renewing my consulting agreement after the acquisition of a smaller logistics firm. One that came with a tangled nest of incompatible software and a VP who still used Lotus Notes. The new systems needed to play nice with the old ones, and no one else wanted to touch it. I was the one who figured out how to translate their ERP's daily exports into something readable, without tanking the company's warehouse projections. So when I brought in the revised master service agreement and pointed out clause 6.2b, Marty barely glanced at it. This bit here, I said, tapping the page. It's a licensing provision. My LLC retains ownership of the framework code. You're just licensing usage. He gave me a look like I just offered him a Sudoku puzzle written in Sanskrit. I kept going. It also says your license is only valid if I maintain continuous administrative access. You lose that access, the license auto-revokes. Marty waved a limp hand in the air. Yeah. Legal said it's fine. Just sign it. I did. They never asked again. No one reviewed the clause when I updated the pipeline schema last spring. No one brought it up when they restructured the reporting modules for investor dashboards. And no one even opened the damn document when Lance swaggered in with his cost-cutting katana and started slicing through vendor contracts like he was on a productivity cleanse. They assumed I was just one more name on a spreadsheet. One more contractor in a sea of invoices. But I wasn't a vendor. I was the vendor. And the MSA wasn't just paperwork. It was a loaded weapon they handed me, smiled at, and forgot about. Now, 3 years later, I sat in my quiet home office, cracked open my encrypted drive, and pulled up the PDF. Clause 6.2b was still there in the same sans serif font, still as crisp and clear as the day I wrote it. Client's usage license for Framework OS and any associated data orchestration components remains valid only if continuous administrative access is maintained to consultant via authorized systems. Translation: cut my access, cut your license. I leaned back in my chair and felt the subtle click of control shift in the room. Even if no one else was in it yet, it didn't matter if they didn't know. The architecture did. The backend knew. And in about 6 hours, once their analytics cron jobs failed and the supply chain dashboard started pushing null values, everyone else would know too. Funny how the smallest clause in a contract, the one they never read, the one they never questioned, was about to become the biggest decision they never meant to make. I minimized the document, opened my log window, and typed a single note. Clause 6.2b. Pending enforcement. No rush. No threat. Just gravity. Quiet. Certain. And now the countdown had started. The first clue came in the form of a stray email from a confused analyst named Brooke. Subject line: quick queue lag on ops dashboard? It had slipped through a forgotten contact form I'd embedded for internal bug reporting, one they clearly hadn't remembered to deactivate. Brooke's message was short and anxious. Hey Clara, are you still on support? Our shipment tracker's showing 0 movement since 7:30 a.m. Weird. Let me know if you see anything on your side. I didn't reply. I just flagged it and watched. 10 minutes later, another came in, this time from someone in compliance, asking if a weekly audit batch had been rescheduled. I traced the API call they referenced. It had failed silently. Their cron job was still pushing requests, but my system wasn't returning answers anymore. The reason? They'd unknowingly severed their own authorization keys when they cut my admin credentials. The system was still live, but it was already starving to death from the inside. It was like watching a house forget who holds the deed. Meanwhile, Lance was on LinkedIn posting about streamlined vendor protocols and modern fiscal discipline. He'd published a little blurb about reducing dependency on legacy third-party integrations. There were likes, comments, a few from board members. One of them even tagged it with #leadership in action. And yet, behind the curtain, their live metrics were twitching. A warehouse throughput dashboard froze at 52%. The revenue roll-up page was now 3 hours behind. A redacted security feed I'd embedded years ago for debugging purposes showed executive assistants clicking and reclicking stale charts, refreshing like hostages tapping on the glass. I smiled. Then I did what any good consultant does before a client implodes. I documented everything. I pulled log timestamps. I exported credential event histories. I took screenshots of null responses stacking up like unpaid bills. I annotated which systems failed due to access restrictions and which ones hadn't failed yet, but would soon once cache data expired. I timestamped it all, backed it up, saved to 3 drives. Then I opened Terminal, typed in my key command, and authenticated with a biometric handshake. The command itself wasn't flashy, just a call to the license beacon system, with one appended string: vendor.clarawest.license.revoke all. The moment I hit enter, a ripple moved through the infrastructure. Not loud, not explosive, but unmistakable. Every dashboard tethered to FrameworkOS went dark. Not with an error message, not with a crash, just absence. The kind of silence that makes executives turn pale because no one's quite sure if it's a bug or a disaster. All they'd see was a flat screen with a loading spinner. Eventually, the system would serve one line of text: license access revoked by vendor. Please contact your account representative. I sat back in my chair, cracked my knuckles, and took a deep breath. There it was. The internal signal. A company that prided itself on real-time insight now couldn't tell if their top 3 clients were still processing orders, couldn't verify warehouse capacity, couldn't audit regulatory benchmarks. They thought they'd cut out the middlewoman. Instead, they cut off their own oxygen. And the best part? The license clause wasn't punitive. It was structural. They didn't just lose access to my code, they lost the right to use it. And now? Now they had to call me. Or go dark forever. Started in sales. Someone must have been mid-demo when the dashboard froze, because 10 minutes after I flipped the kill switch, I got a panicked voicemail from an unknown number. Just 6 seconds of background chatter and a man hissing. Refresh it again. Again. No, Jesus, it's still blank. Click. Then came the barrage. Legal, IT, compliance. Each of them hitting red alert in their own flavor. Internally, they probably thought it was a DDoS attack or a corrupted deployment, maybe even a misfired push from one of the junior devs who still couldn't explain the difference between staging and prod. But it wasn't an attack. It was a contract. Enforced. Their flagship sales dashboard, the one they used to monitor live deal velocity across 6 regions, was now a ghost. The graphs didn't error out. They just stopped. No new deals. No movement. No funnel activity. Just the outline of a UI with no heartbeat. In the supply chain module, shipment tracking collapsed. Logistics partners started emailing confused status checks. System isn't updating. Have you stopped reporting to Portal 3? Warehouse managers couldn't even tell if the morning batch had left the dock. Meanwhile, compliance was spiraling. The quarterly attestation cycle was underway. They needed timestamped records of internal process compliance across 4 business units. And the dashboards feeding those records? Offline. Without real-time visibility, they couldn't verify anything. Which meant disclosure violations. Which meant lawsuits. I watched it all from my living room, laptop perched on a blanket, tea in hand. Just me, a stack of clean logs, and a license beacon blinking red in the corner of my custom dashboard. They thought the system would break loudly, sirens, fire, screaming engineers. No, it died quietly, elegantly, like a symphony ending mid-note. The CFO was too arrogant to even check the systems himself. He kept shouting into meetings, just escalate it to IT, assuming the problem was some junior-level glitch. But the more they dug, the colder legal got. Because at the bottom of every failed query was a simple message, unmistakable, unchangeable. License access revoked by vendor. Please contact your account representative. That line had been hard-coded in the Framework OS license gateway since version 1.3. There was no override. No backdoor. Not unless they still had my credentials, which, thanks to Lance, they didn't. Calls started hitting my Google Voice inbox one after another. First a project manager I hadn't heard from in a year. Then someone from the infrastructure team who once mocked me in a meeting for asking if they backed up the node registry. They didn't. Then a director of something ops who left me on read. When I sent them a 3-paragraph summary of risk warnings 8 months ago. I didn't answer any of them. The final call came from someone I did recognize. Jason, the COO. His voice was tight, brittle. Hey Clara. We're seeing some weird behavior in the dashboards. Not sure if this is a permissions thing or something else, but Lance said your contract was still active. Just wondering if we could hop on a quick call. He paused. Clara, if this was a misunderstanding, we're happy to. He stopped himself. Please call me. I didn't. I just opened the licensing folder, marked every document enforcement initiated, and took another sip of tea. They hadn't cut off a tool. They'd pulled the pin on a license they never understood. And now? Now they were standing in the dark trying to sell clarity. The emergency meeting started with shouting. Jason had barely closed the door when Lance slammed his palm on the table and barked. Just give her access back. What the hell is the problem? Legal didn't answer right away. They were still scrolling. Paper copies of the master service agreement were fanned out like tarot cards across the table, highlighters bleeding through margins, and someone had a whiteboard open with bullet points that read like a slow descent into hell. Access revoked unilaterally. Clause 6.2b. Enforceable? Framework OS equals proprietary. Licensee? Ops was pale. IT looked like they hadn't slept. Everyone was trying to figure out if this was a tech problem or a legal one, because no one wanted to admit it was both. That they had not only cut off the person who built the damn engine but had also, quite possibly, voided the legal right to drive the car. I don't care what her stupid clause says, Lance snapped, arms crossed. She's a contractor. We pay her. Just restore the access and tell her to fix it. Legal didn't even look up. Just flipped another page and slowly traced a yellow line with the edge of their pen. Lance, the general counsel finally said flat. Clause 6.2b states that the license is void if administrative access is severed. It's void. This isn't a suspension of service. It's a termination of legal usage. Ops piped up from the corner. But we still have the system. We're using it. Illegally, legal replied. That shut the room up. IT, who'd spent the last hour rebooting servers and chasing ghosts, finally spoke. We can't spin up an alternate. It's too embedded. The dependencies, routing logic, schema parsing, it's all custom. Her framework is the glue. Without it, the APIs fail. A project manager in the back cleared their throat. I thought we had a backup plan. You were the backup plan, Jason muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose. Then came the moment. The one I'd waited for. Someone from legal, a young analyst, maybe an intern, was flipping through a signature page and frowned. Wait, hang on. Heads turned. Who's the actual licensee on the original MSA? The room went dead silent. She turned the document around. Pointed. There, in plain black ink, under the field, consultant entity and license owner was one name. Clara West Consulting, LLC. The general counsel stared at it. Then turned to Lance. You didn't even read the contract before cutting her access, did you? Lance scoffed. She's a glorified contractor. We wrote the checks. Ops whispered. So we're not even licensed to run the dashboards right now? The junior analyst, still peering over the page, quietly said it out loud. She is. She owns it. The license. The system. The word she hung in the air like a foghorn. Jason's jaw tensed. Jesus Christ. Legal closed the folder and leaned back. Unless she agrees to relicense under new terms, we're in breach. And everything you've accessed since the revocation timestamp is, well, it's a liability. You could hear the CFO's breath hitch. His face turned from red to white in 5 seconds flat. He opened his mouth, then closed it. No one had answers. No one had backup. Because I'd been the backup. I'd been the invisible scaffolding holding up their data castle. And they just kicked me out of it without checking who owned the bricks. My phone lit up at 7:41 p.m. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. I already knew who it was. Clara, Lance said, and the faux casual tone cracked halfway through my name. Hey, just wanted to clear the air. Obviously there's been some, miscommunication. No big deal. Let's just get your access restored and move on. Cool. It was the first time I'd ever heard him speak directly to me. His voice was thinner than I expected. Reedy. Like someone used to being the loudest in a quiet room, now realizing he's not in charge of the volume. I said nothing. He tried again. Look, I don't know how this license thing got blown out of proportion, but legal's looking into it. Obviously, we value your contribution. We just need the dashboards back up. So if we can just roll back whatever you did. My LLC doesn't respond to threats, I said calmly, cutting through his babble like a scalpel. You breached Clause 6.2 the moment you revoked my administrative access. That terminated the license. Silence. A beat. Then he said it, the line that told me he still hadn't learned a damn thing. Clara, come on. Don't make this bigger than it has to be. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I opened the PDF invoice I drafted 2 hours earlier. It was crisp, factual, and polite. Titled, Emergency Framework OS Relicensing Agreement. Below it, line items. License restoration fee, $80,000. Emergency system reverification, $25,000. Legal review and contract generation, $10,000. Administrative reauthorization onboarding, $5,000. Total due upon receipt, $120,000. Terms, net 1. I dropped it into an email with the subject line, License Reinstatement Terms, Clara West Consulting, LLC. No message body, just the invoice. Then I sent it. A second later, I heard the ping on his end. What the hell is this? He barked. Are you serious? 120 grand. I didn't flinch. That's the going rate for salvaging a breach that jeopardizes your Q4 disclosures and investor trust. He lost it. We pay you $20,000 a month. You think you can just hold us hostage with some fine print? No, I replied, flat as concrete. You held yourselves hostage when you assumed the system was yours to cut off. You voided the license. You ignored the MSA. This isn't ransom. This is contract enforcement. You think the board is going to eat this? You think we're just going to write you a check and smile? I checked my watch. That's not my concern. You've got 48 hours before compliance deadlines flag unreconciled metrics. After that, good luck explaining why your quarterly reporting lacks audit trails. You're bluffing, he snapped. I'm billing. And then I hung up. No warning. No drama. Just a clean disconnect. He called back twice. Left a voicemail on the third try, voice cracking around the edges, suddenly polite. I didn't listen. I just opened the tracking dashboard and watched the invoice status tick from sent to opened. Then I waited. Not like prey. Like gravity. By 9 o'clock the next morning, the executive suite was in full containment mode. The board had been summoned under the pretense of an infrastructure anomaly, but by the time the CEO entered red-faced and storm-charged, no one was pretending anymore. Quarterly numbers were due for pre-release review. They had none. Jason opened with the simplest version he could stomach. Our real-time compliance metrics are offline. Clara West revoked the system license. The CEO slammed a folder onto the table. How the hell does one contractor hold our entire reporting pipeline hostage? No one answered. Because the truth was worse than that. She wasn't a contractor. She was the licensee. The auditor from their third-party compliance firm was seated quietly near the window, expression unreadable. But when prompted, he spoke with the calm precision of a guillotine. Your data availability window closes in 31 hours. If your metrics remain unverifiable, we'll be forced to classify your Q4 submission as non-compliant under Reg FD. That triggers auto-notifications to the SEC, blacklists investor confidence tools, and flags you in at least 2 disclosure review databases. I've seen companies sink on less. Someone at the table let out a sharp breath. Another just lowered his head into his hands. Lance, suddenly very quiet, pushed a printed copy of my invoice across the table like it might catch fire. We can't pay this. It sets a precedent. It's blackmail. Legal didn't blink. It's not blackmail if it's contractually enforceable. And it is. She's leveraging our own data against us. No, Jason said, finally snapping. She's owning the platform you tried to gut without reading the fine print. The CEO looked like he was chewing glass. Options. Legal was ready. Pay the invoice. Secure a new agreement. Restore access. We'll clean up the messaging later. Frame it as a strategic relicensing. Silence followed. The CFO, Lance, looked gaunt now, as if the suit on his back had turned 2 sizes too large overnight. He rubbed his temples, then reached for the pen on the table with the grace of a man signing his own performance review in blood. He signed. The wire transfer went through by 2:16 p.m. My payment notification pinged at 2:17. 3 minutes later, my legal doc team issued a 3-year relicensing agreement under new terms, backdated to the minute they revoked my original access. Clauses now included license escalation fees, SLA penalty triggers, mandatory quarterly audits, arbitration venue pre-selected, Ohio my turf, reinstated access credentials with administrative override permissions. They signed that too. By 5 p.m., systems blinked back online. Dashboards began to populate. Metrics slowly came back to life. The machine groaned forward. And deep inside their newly updated license database, one name now sat permanently as Framework OS architect and master license holder. Clara West Consulting LLC. No longer an optional vendor. Now a permanent dependency. They didn't clap. They didn't celebrate. They just kept their heads down, typing faster, scrambling to fix what never would have broken if they just left me alone. Lance didn't speak for the rest of the day. Just stared at his hands like he was waiting for one of them to turn the page back to yesterday. 1 week later, the office was back to pretending everything was fine. Dashboards were green, graphs were animating, and the real-time KPIs pulsed on the executive monitors like nothing had ever happened. But the tempo was off. Too quiet. Too careful. Like everyone had started walking on padded floors. The internal memo dropped on a Tuesday. Just a single paragraph release from the CEO's office, circulated to staff with the subject line, System Licensing Update. It read, in part, "We're pleased to announce the successful renewal of our core data platform through continued partnership with our vendor partner. We appreciate their flexibility and long-standing technical expertise in supporting mission-critical operations. No mention of what actually happened. No acknowledgement of the fire they started or the ashes they had to eat. The same day, the CFO resigned to pursue new ventures. No farewell post. No handoff email. Just a line buried in the HR Slack. Effective immediately. Lance was gone, and no one dared say his name in a meeting again. The newly signed agreement was airtight. Every license routed through my LLC. Every update required my sign-off. Every quarterly audit now included a clause verifying that I, by name, retained uninterrupted administrative access. They'd built their house on my foundation, thought they could remove the architect and still expect the walls to hold. Now they paid rent. They paid on time. I didn't gloat, didn't post anything online, didn't send a just checking in email like they used to send me when they needed something fixed in a panic. I simply opened my email footer and updated the signature block. Clara West, founder, architect, owner, Frameworko. Licensed exclusively via Clara West Consulting LLC. No tagline. No link. Just the fact of it, clean and absolute. And when I closed my laptop that night, I sat still for a moment and stared out the window at nothing in particular. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even proud. I was done. They cut me out of the dashboard. Now they rent it from me.